Ever seen a retired K9 flip the script on three bikers before anyone even knows what's happening? Stay with me because one quiet walk in a small Texas town turns into a lesson about instinct, training, and why underestimating the wrong system can end your night fast. The night in Pinewood, Texas, had that familiar rural stillness where you can hear your own footsteps and the hum of distant highway traffic sounds like ocean surf. Street lamps threw soft pools of yellow light onto empty sidewalks, and the air carried a faint mix of dust, cut grass, and wood smoke from someone's backyard fire. The only thing cutting through the calm was the steady rhythm of an old man's shoes and the soft pad of a dog's paws beside him. James Carter, 67, black, a retired factory foreman who'd spent a lifetime fixing machines and raising a family on no-nonsense patience, was taking his usual evening walk. Folks in Pinewood knew him as the kind of man who nodded at everyone, never hurried, never loud, and somehow always seemed to carry a calm that made other people feel safer just being near him. Beside James walked Max, an imposing German shepherd with intelligent eyes and a posture that didn't belong to an ordinary pet. Even in the low light, Max moved with a certain authority, the kind you see in professionals who've done the job long enough to stop performing and start operating. His head stayed level. His ears tracked the environment. His gait was smooth, controlled, not wandering. To the casual eye, he was simply a big, well-trained dog. But what nobody on those streets knew, what James almost never talked about because he didn't need to, was that Max wasn't just a companion. He was a retired police K9, a dog who had once worked real streets, real suspects, real chaos, and had been trained to read threats faster than most humans can process them. Years earlier, after Max's service ended and he was cleared for adoption, James had taken him in, not because he wanted a guard dog, and certainly not because he was looking for trouble, but because he understood something simple. Even the strongest systems wear down without care, and loyal partners deserve a soft landing. James never imagined that his quiet walk would ever require Max to go back into operational mode that night. Though the environment changed before James even knew why. As they passed a small park on Elm Street, James felt a strange chill crawl up his spine. The kind you get when the world goes from neutral to unstable. Max, who normally walked without a sound, slowed half a step and let out a low growl. James had heard Max bark at squirrels. He'd seen him alert to coyotes on the edge of town, but he almost never heard that growl. It wasn't a pet noise, it was a warning. Big guys, leather jackets worn in that way, that says they've been in rough places. Heavy boots, hard eyes, the kind of men who move like the world owes them space. The leader stepped forward first. A thick beard, tattoos running down his forearms, shoulders wide enough to fill a doorway. His smile wasn't friendly. It was predatory, the kind of grin that expects fear to show up on cue. "Well, look what we got here, gentlemen," he called out, voice laced with contempt. An old man taking a stroll with his guard dog. "You think that mutt can protect you, Grandpa?" The other two laughed and fanned out slightly, closing distance the way wolves do when they think prey is cornered. James stopped. He tightened his grip on Max's collar. Not to hold him back out of doubt, but to keep him close and steady. James could feel his heart accelerate in his chest. But he'd lived long enough to know that panic is fuel for men like this. "I don't want any trouble," James said evenly. Teeth flashed under the street lamp. It wasn't a frenzy, it was controlled, deliberate, a clear signal. "You are entering a boundary you don't understand." One of the bikers pulled a length of chain from his pocket and looped it around his fist like he was preparing for a fight he thought was already won. Max instantly shifted position, shoulders squared, body angled, so he stood between James and the aggressor. Still no barking, just that rumbling growl that sounded like thunder starting in the distance. James swallowed. He knew Max was trained for situations like this. He'd seen remnants of it, how Max reacted to sudden movements, how he watched hands, how he could snap into focus in an instant. But James never expected he'd have to rely on that training like this. "You don't know who you're messing with," James said, voice firm despite the fear pressing at his ribs. "Leave us alone, or you'll regret it." The men laughed, but there was a flicker of hesitation in their eyes, because even bullies can feel when a system is not behaving the way they expect. The leader shrugged, like this was all entertainment. "Let's see what this dog's got," he said, lunging forward. And that's when everything flipped. Max didn't wait for contact. He didn't bark for warning beyond what he'd already given. He executed, in a blur of trained movement. He advanced toward the closest threat, tracking the chain's arc like he'd done 100 times in training. The chain guy swung. Max dodged, cleanly stepping inside the swing where the weapon loses leverage. Then Max clamped down on the man's forearm with controlled force, precisely the way a police K9 is trained to immobilize without escalating to lethal injury. The biker screamed and collapsed. Before the other two could even fully register what they'd just seen, Max released and pivoted. One grabbed a piece of wood from the curb and charged. Max launched forward, knocked him off balance, and drove him to the ground with a sharp body hit that pinned his movement. James watched, stunned and shaking, like someone seeing a dormant subsystem suddenly wake up and run at full capacity. My dog stopped on Elm Street by the park. The third biker froze. He looked from his downed friends to the dog that had dismantled them in seconds. His confidence evaporated into survival instinct. "This is crazy," he muttered, turning to run. But Max moved again, fast, low, decisive. He cut the man off, planting himself dead in the escape path, eyes locked, posture screaming, "Don't test me." The biker raised his hands, shaking. Okay, call him off." James found his voice. "Max, stop." The dog obeyed, instantly backing to James's side, still watching the threats like a security system that never goes idle until the last risk is removed. When the sirens finally grew loud and close, the bikers were already subdued. Blue and red lights washed the street. Officers spilled out and secured the men while James stood beside Max, breathing hard, but upright. The scene looked unreal. 3 bikers who came in cocky and predatory, now sitting in cuffs on the pavement, defeated by an elderly man and a dog. A tall officer with gray hair, the kind of veteran cop whose posture tells you he's seen decades of mess, approached James. "Sir, we got your call. What happened?" James gestured toward the bikers. They tried to jump me. Max handled it before they could." The officer's eyes shifted to Max, and his expression changed. Recognition lit across his face like a memory snapping into focus. "Wait, is that Max? Max from the City K9 unit?" James blinked. "Yeah, I adopted him after he retired." The officer let out a breath, half laugh, half disbelief. "I worked with Max years ago. That dog was a legend. Huge seizures, dangerous captures. He saved lives. I can't believe he's still got that gear." A younger officer, probably a rookie, stared at Max like a kid spotting a Hall of Famer. "Is that the Max from the training tapes? My instructor used to talk about him like he was unbeatable. That dog protected his owner. You're lucky he was merciful." The bikers got loaded into cruisers, still rattled. One tried to backpedal. "We weren't going to do anything serious. It was a joke." The rookie snorted. "A joke where you threaten an old man on a dark street. Sounds like intimidation, and you picked the wrong target." When the cars pulled away, James finally knelt by Max and ran a hand over his head. "You're amazing, boy," he said quietly, voice thick. "I don't know what I'd do without you." The veteran officer watched them, smiling. "Dogs like Max aren't just pets, Mr. Carter. They're partners, heroes, and tonight, he showed he still is one. Before the officers left, neighbors began trickling out of their homes, drawn by sirens and commotion. Martha, an elderly woman who always chatted with James on his walks, hurried over. "James, are you all right?" "I am," James said, nodding at Max. Thanks to him, people murmured in awe. One young neighbor started recording, speaking into his phone. "Y'all need to see this. Retired police dog saves his owner from bikers." By morning, the video was everywhere. Retired K9 stops biker attack headlines. Thousands of views, comments pouring in. People weren't just praising Max's strength. They were amazed at the discipline. "That dog moved like a pro," someone wrote. "You can't fake training like that." Another comment hit hard. Protecting the vulnerable is what real service looks like. For James, it felt surreal. He wasn't used to attention. Max certainly wasn't either. He was content with quiet walks and a bowl of food, not internet fame. But in Pinewood, something shifted. The next morning, James sat on his porch with coffee when a car pulled up. The gray-haired officer stepped out with colleagues and a local reporter. "Hope you don't mind us dropping by," the officer said warmly. "We wanted to do something special for Max." "This is for Max," the officer said. James took it carefully, eyes stinging. He knelt, slipped it on Max, and the dog sat up straight, calm as ever, almost like he understood the moment. "Now you earned it, boy," James whispered, hand steady on Max's neck. The reporter snapped photos, asked questions. James answered humbly. "I knew he was special, but watching him protect me. He reminded me what loyalty and courage really are." After they left, Pinewood kept changing in little visible ways. Neighbors greeted James and Max on walks now. Kids ran up yelling, "Super Max!" People brought dog treats. Martha even brought over a framed drawing from her granddaughter Max in a superhero cape with a medal. "She heard what happened and wanted to honor him," Martha said. James smiled, touched to the core. "Tell her I'll hang it up. Max will love it." Max wagged his tail and licked Martha's hand like he'd always done. The bikers, on the other hand, didn't get to shrug this off. Security cameras caught the full sequence, including one of them pulling a knife. Charges stuck. They stayed in jail pending trial. James decided to show up in court. "They need to understand this wasn't just an attack on me," he told the officer. "It was an attack on everybody trying to live with dignity." In testimony, James spoke clearly, not vengeful, but firm. He talked about what happened, about Max's restraint, and about the line every community has to draw against intimidation. The sentence was heavy enough to matter, and still James, true to who he was, said quietly afterward, "Sometimes a hard lesson is the start of becoming better." Not long after, Pinewood's town hall organized a public event in Max's honor. Families packed the space. A plaque was unveiled, honoring a hero Max, guardian of Pinewood. A replica of his medal sat on display. James took the stage with Max beside him. "Courage isn't the absence of fear," James said, voice steady, looking down at his dog. "It's choosing to protect what's right even when you are scared." The crowd applauded, and Max, sensing the energy, gave a short bark that made everyone laugh and clap harder. Later that evening, James and Max walked through their usual park, now brighter with new streetlights the city had installed after the incident. James paused, sat on a bench, and Max lay down beside him, calm as ever. "They're calling you a hero," James said softly, scratching behind Max's ear. "But you've always been that to me. Thank you." Max leaned into him, tail thumping once, like the whole thing was no big deal, and that's the part that stuck with Pinewood the most. The real heroes don't need to announce themselves. They just show up when the system fails, when the threat appears, when somebody vulnerable needs a shield. An elderly man and a retired K9 turned a dark street into a reminder that training doesn't disappear, Loyalty doesn't expire, and underestimating a quiet team can be the worst mistake you make. If this story hit you, share it with someone who still believes courage can come wrapped in unexpected forms. And subscribe for more stories where kindness, grit, and community show up right when they're needed most.